Now, more on one of our top stories and the illusion that the Queen's address to mark the centenary of Sandringham Women's Institute had something to do with Brexit. The monarch reached out to urge Brits not to miss the bigger picture and encouraged virtues of respecting different points of view. But was it really about Brexit Britain? Well, to discuss this further is Guido Fawkes news editor Hugh Bennett and also the royal commentator and biographer Claudia Joseph. Thank you both very much indeed for being with us this evening on Sky. Hugh, perhaps I can start with you first. Presumably you're not in any doubt that she was referring to Brexit here.
Well, I think when you look at what she said, it's clear that she chose her words very carefully. And obviously, the Queen is not someone who takes interventions in any sort of political debate lightly. But I think when you consider, the state that the political debate has got to in this country, with where Brexit is at the moment, where MPs from all sides really threatening really unprecedented constitutional measures to try and get their own way on Brexit. I think, and temperatures just rising higher and higher and higher, I think you can see why I think the Queen perhaps wanted to do this, inject a little bit of calm into the situation, just get people to turn down the rhetoric a bit and actually focus on working out a way through this rather than resorting to ever more extreme methods in the Brexit process.
But Claudia, we all know the Queen is meant to be above politics. Do you think she was overstepping the mark a little here?
Well, personally, I don't, because I don't think she has made her views on the subject of Brexit which way she would like to go at all. All she has said is, please calm down, think of other people, be considerate. She's a terribly religious lady. She comes from an era when people were much more civilised and polite to each other. And I think it is a global problem now. It's not just Brexit. We see people getting increasingly upset about Donald Trump. We see the bullying on social media. And I think she's saying, calm down across the board, not just Brexit, but just think of other people and don't jump down their throats.
And Claudia, just staying with you, this was a private speech, an annual event at the WI in Norfolk, a very tiny organisation, a private meeting, really meant just for the ears of those there. And yet the palace made sure that journalists and the media did get that speech. They wanted this message to get out further, didn't they?
Well, I think inevitably each year that the speech or some parts of the speech do leak out from the Women's Institute, and this was a special anniversary, so it was very important. Of course, the Queen wanted her message to get out. It very much echoed her Christmas broadcast. She was saying the same thing in her Christmas message. Think of other people, be considerate, listen to other people's points of views and compromise. We live in a world that's getting increasingly antagonistic towards people who have different opinions to each other. And I think she's quite rightly worried, but that doesn't mean that she's being political. I think she's just wanting her country to not get fractured, so to speak.
Hugh, the Queen has seen 13 British Prime Ministers, I think it is, come and go. She has her weekly meeting, of course, with the current Prime Minister. What do you think most frustrates her about politicians, particularly at the moment?
Well, I think you can point to any number of things, really. I think she's certainly not the only one who's frustrated with politicians. Obviously, with her remarks, she's been studiously careful to avoid publicly coming down in favour of one side or another. But I think on a more general level, I think it's not surprising that people in the country at large are frustrated with politicians at the moment, because this is really a mess of their own making. You've got MPs who, 3 or 4 years ago, voted to hold this referendum. The referendum was held. They've then said, OK, we are going to implement the result. They've stood on election manifestos to do that. They've triggered Article 50, and now they're saying, well, hang on a minute, despite us doing all of that, actually, we're not really comfortable where our previous decisions have taken us, so we're going to sort of try and tear up all these constitutional principles to try and get our own way. And I think it's clear you've got this refrain that people say Leave voters didn't know what they're talking about. I think it's clear that a lot of MPs didn't really know what they were voting for, and I think it's really a sort of collective failure of the political class. It's a complete gap in between their actions, what they've promised in the past, and what they're trying to now deliver, or actually failing to deliver now. So I can see why everyone would be frustrated, not least the Queen.
Yeah, Hugh, just on that note, since the Fixed-Term Parliament Act, the sort of some of the Queen's powers, if you like, have been taken from her in terms of having the power to appoint prime ministers. I mean, what power does she still have? We've heard about Jacob Rees-Mogg wanting the Queen to suspend Parliament potentially. Is that just fantasy?
Well, I think that would. I'm not 100% on all the procedural aspects, but I think that would actually be really a decision for the Prime Minister, who would then ask the Queen to prorogue Parliament on her behalf. So I think that's sort of the Prime Minister acting as the Queen's authority. So it wouldn't be the Queen making a decision herself in that case. And I think there would actually be precedent for that. If you look actually, I think just 10 years ago in Canada, the Canadian Prime Minister, where they have a very similar system of government, he actually prorogued Parliament for several months during a constitutional crisis there. So I think in that sense there would be precedent for the Prime Minister to do that, although it wouldn't be the Queen's decision. Other people have said the Queen could refuse to sign off on the bill if Yvette Cooper sort of succeeds in changing parliamentary procedure to allow a coalition of minority backbench MPs to start functioning as the executive. And I think that, and then we would really be into very interesting constitutional territory, because you've got this clash of the legislative trying to take over the what is the sort of the executive, or in technically speaking the Queen's authority in Parliament.
Yeah. So I suppose it begs the question, doesn't it, Claudia, whether the Queen is going to make any more statements, as the clock ticks down towards Brexit, or indeed other members of the royal family. We know of other members who like to give their views on things, don't we?
Well, indeed they do, and the obvious one is Prince Charles, and he has said recently that he's going to meddle less in politics, but he will clearly have a view, and as will his sons. I personally think the Queen has made two quite strong, though very carefully worded statements about what she feels generally, whether you take it about Brexit or a more global issue. And I think she will feel that she shouldn't intervene unless, obviously, she's asked to by the Prime Minister, and that will be a different case.
Yeah. Interestingly, Hugh, the Queen joined WI members in a live version of the TV quiz Pointless during this event. Alexander Armstrong, the TV host, was doing a live version of the show. I mean, do you think the whole thing was a bit pointless, or do you think people actually will listen and maybe the rhetoric will tone down a little bit?
No, I think the Queen has this huge respect from people of all sides of the political debate, because she has actually been so careful never to take sides on a partisan matter. And I think with her statement today, I think she's preserved that as well. She's avoided coming down on one side or the other, and I think because of that, she does have this respect. She is the figurehead, she is the head of state of the country, and she obviously cares deeply about the direction of the country, and in constitutional issues she is ultimately still the supreme authority in this country. So I think, yeah, absolutely, MPs will take notice. They will pause for thought and think, well, hang on a minute, isn't it time that we did actually take the temperature down a little bit, and maybe start acting in a more proportionate way? Because I think, as Claudia says, I think the Queen will be very reluctant to make any more interventions in the debate. I think that she'll be very careful not to really come down on one side or the other in something that is such a heated partisan divide. So I think she will be hoping that MPs actually take her advice and dial things down a little bit.
Yeah, we shall see, shan't we, over the next few days and weeks. Claudia Joseph, royal commentator, Hugh Bennett from Guido Fawkes. Thank you both very much indeed.